Shahidul Ahmed starts a life sentence today for the murder of Rachel Manning in Milton Keynes 13 years ago.
But he's not the first person to be imprisoned over her death. In 2002, Rachel's boyfriend, Barri White, and his friend, Keith Wyatt, were both jailed. They were only released after a BBC programme questioned some of the evidence used in the trial. Jessica Shahidul has been looking at the case.
After almost 13 years and 2 wrongful convictions, the man who really killed Rachel Manning in 2000 was sentenced to life in jail yesterday. Shahidul Ahmed strangled Rachel in Milton Keynes and dumped her body at a golf course. On the night she died, Rachel, pictured here in the blue wig, had been to a fancy dress party with her boyfriend Barri White. The pair had an argument and Rachel left the club alone to catch a taxi but never made it home. In 2002, Barri was jailed for her murder and his friend Keith Hyatt for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. Both had their convictions quashed in 2007 after a BBC Rough Justice documentary questioned the forensic evidence used to convict them. Mr. White says that he's over the moon that Ahmed has been convicted of her murder and that justice has finally been done. But Rachel's parents say they will never forgive her boyfriend for letting their daughter leave alone that December night.
We believe Rachel would still be with us today if she'd not been abandoned by her boyfriend the night she was attacked, killed and brutally battered.
I hope they believe now that I am innocent of this crime. I do hope they believe that, and I hope they know how much I did love their daughter.
Well, joining us now from London is Keith Hyatt, who, as we just saw, served 3 years for conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. In the studio here, the former producer of the BBC's Rough Justice programme, which helped free Keith and Barri. That's Louise Shorter. Very good morning to you. First of all, Keith, if I could turn to you, a miscarriage of justice on an extraordinary scale. I just wonder if you could give us a little insight into what it was like for you in those years when you were jailed, you knew you were innocent, and the years were passing and nothing was happening.
Quite frightening, really, because you went in there having this belief in the British justice, and I think we were both waiting for someone to come along, unlock the door and say, sorry, it's all been a mistake, you can go home now. But that didn't happen, and we learned to our cost that the British justice isn't quite what we thought it was.
Yeah, and Keith, just to give us a sense, I mean, people have an impression that in a jail, a lot of people are saying, I didn't do it. How did people react to your always saying that I'm innocent, that I didn't do this? How did people react?
Well, it does upset some of the prisons inside, but most of them were pretty good, and after a while, the staff, they themselves start believing you, particularly when the BBC Rough Justice got involved with our case.
OK, Keith, we'll come back to you in a minute, if we can. Louise, so you took up the case, as it were. Just kind of outline what happened and how you got to this conclusion. It's a long story, I know, but let's start a little bit at the beginning.
It is. 11 years was our involvement in the case.
Yeah.
Keith's family wrote to us pretty much as soon as he was convicted and asked Rough Justice to take a look at his case. So I went off and met both men's families, sat with them for an afternoon and went through and got a picture of what they were like. And we then really just tried to unpick the evidence, to look at the overall scenario that had been put forward and to see whether it stacked up, whether or not this seemed likely. We then set about checking wherever we could anything which could be independently verified against what they said had happened that night. We checked that. So we checked CCTV, and when they said they were out looking for Rachel, there they were on CCTV looking for her.
And one of the key things was the sort of timings involved, wasn't it?
It was, absolutely. We broke it all down so that we could really plot where they were because of the amount of cameras around Milton Keynes and the amount of phone calls that Barri had made. We could work out where he was at various times, and we found that there was actually only a very small window of about 20 minutes where they could have been killing her and disposing of the body. So right from the start, that set off enormous alarm bells, as in, how likely is this? Are these guys really, these sort of super master criminals that have plotted this and managed to get away with this? So then we looked from there at the forensic evidence, which had really put them in the dock, which came down to particle evidence, which was on the victim's skirt, which was also in Keith's van, which an expert said was so unusual it meant she had to have been in the van before she was killed. And once we started looking at that evidence, we found that that was based entirely on assumptions, those assumptions hadn't been tested. And once we had them tested, the evidence crumbled and it all fell away.
And Keith, the police, the detectives involved have apologised, I know, for what happened. What are your reflections now, knowing what you know about what they didn't do and the evidence they didn't uncover?
Well, since that time, I mean, obviously the police officers had changed. I mean, the ones involved in this particular trial have been, I would say, excellent, and I admired their courage to come forward and apologise to us, because that's quite rare these days.
And Keith, I mean, it would be, you know, it must have had a very, very serious impact on your life, what happened to you, and the fact that you spent these years in jail.
Well, it did. I mean, one, you're away from your family, and my father during the time was not well, so it was quite annoying just not being able to get out and being able to help, being there for them at a time when they needed it.
Louise, I know that you don't rough justice. You don't do rough justice anymore.
It was axed by the BBC, sadly, in 2007.
But I mean, how does that? You talked about that initial meeting and an instinct there. Possibly there was something worth looking at. That doesn't happen obviously every case.
Oh no. I mean, when I now run a unit called Inside Justice, which carries on doing similar work, and we have, in the first 3 years of operation, we've had 600 people writing to us, asking us to look at their cases, and I'm sure an awful lot of those cases, people are just having a go, you know, trying to see if there's something which could be found that might get them out on a technicality. So no, I think what you have to do with these cases is really look at the detailed evidence and look to see whether that evidence was sound, if it was put forward on a sound basis, if the scenario which was put forward appears to be right, to fit it, and if there are concerns there with it, then you have to keep picking away, because once somebody is convicted, getting the conviction overturned is an enormous struggle. I mean, it's taken Barry and Keith 13 years, and it really is an uphill struggle.
Louise, thank you very much for your time this morning. Keith, thank you as well.
Thank you.